What's up, fight fans? It's your boy, Mad Bad and Sage Northcutt's dad, Jack Slack. And we're coming at you with episode 92 of the Fights Gone By podcast. Cheeky late week poddy. I know we all like when I do this. It's possible because I'd like to thank Rizin, the UFC, and every other fight company for putting on fights this weekend. Do love a busy weekend. It also means that that flows over into next week, because there will be tons of interesting shit happening over the weekend, and I will be able to write about that for a couple of days and talk about it on the next podcast. You know, interesting shit begets interesting shit. You know, I don't mind a great week and then a shit week and then a great week. You know, it's these constant just mediocre weeks that really take their toll on you as someone covering the sport. You know, it's hard to talk about one good fight last week and one good fight coming up and then do that over and over again. But this weekend looks absolutely stonkingly good, and I look forward to talking about it into next week even. So, right, let's talk about the brief bits of news that happened between, Tuesday and today? First interesting bit of news for me, as someone who has shat all over Edson Barboza's performances, is that he's joined American Top Team. I believe he was down with Frankie Edgar, Eddie Alvarez, and Zabit at Mark Henry's place. Which is Mark Henry is a good coach, but he's also kind of hilarious. You know, every time someone talks about Zabit, they bring up that Mark Henry said that he's definitely going to be the next world champion, and this, that, and the other, and he's never seen anything like him. And I just had to be like, if the Mayweather-McGregor fight taught us anything, it's that Mark Henry says a lot of things. Because immediately after Eddie Alvarez lost to Conor McGregor, Mark Henry was like, well, I think he's the greatest boxer I've ever seen. I think he's probably better than 90% of professional boxers in the top, you know, who own world titles, and I think he's probably got a very good shot at beating Mayweather. So, steady on. If you beat up one of Mark Henry's boys, he will call you the greatest ever. But Edson Barboza, interesting to see him getting out of that team. If he goes he's gone to American Top Team, but if he goes somewhere where they can teach him some fucking ring craft, he might do all right. You know, it's the same shit over and over again from him, losing the same fights the same ways. And, you know, at least going somewhere new, he will be training with training partners who will push him in new ways. And every coach in the world knows why he's losing fights. You know, we can all look at those fights and say, yep, he gets caught on the fence because he's throwing kicks. He's trying to time guys with switch kicks as they come in, and that's his and wheel kicks, and that's his entire answer to someone moving in. He doesn't circle the cage unless he hits the cage and then starts sprinting. And if he gets jabbed in the face, he sprints a full lap of the cage and then resets and then gets jabbed in the face again. And he pauses for ages before he kicks or does anything. There's a lot of stuff wrong with Edson Barboza. He's the most talented fighter with the most obvious tells and habits on the roster, probably. But lots of good guys down at American Top Team. Get him working with Kyoji. There you go. Kyoji will teach you a bit about ring craft and not telegraphing your kicks. Other news this week. Actually, only one other piece of news this week. Darren Till versus Tyron Woodley is set to headline UFC 228 in September. This is because Tyron Woodley versus Colby Covington fell through. Some people are upset about that. People were way too invested in this fight, in my opinion. People were forgetting that Colby Covington, fairly boring fighter. Tyron Woodley, provably very boring fighter. But because Colby Covington was playing this character and Tyron Woodley said that he had a sore vagina or something, people were like, oh my god, I'm so hyped for this fight, the beef is real. Like Rampage versus Rashad. Everyone was like, oh, these guys are going to kill each other. And then they came out and nothing really happened. Obviously, Darren Till coming on the heels of a boring fight as well, but at least an interesting, aggressive fighter. And someone, well, if we briefly look at that matchup, you know, Tyron Woodley, his whole game is standing on the cage and shooting takedowns off it or running in sprinting overhands, whereas Darren Till's whole game is backing people up to the cage, bouncing back and trying to counter, or just mauling them with kicks along the cage. So at least you've got a fight that's going to take place in an interesting setting there, whereas with Maya versus Woodley, you had a guy who all his interesting stuff comes when the wrestling's working against a guy who's really good at stopping wrestling, or a much better wrestler just generally. And with Wonderboy, you had a guy who really does best when guys are coming to him, doesn't like to take risks, doesn't like to push the pace, doesn't like to let his hands go no matter how hard he advertises it. And Woodley, a guy who sits on the fence and then sprints in with one overhand around. So, you know, those fights, I mean, the first Wonderboy versus Woodley fight was surprisingly decent, but again, you saw in that Thompson was very reluctant to sort of push his advantages on offense. So they sort of stylistically shut each other down, at least till striking typically takes place, where Woodley's regular game takes place anyway in his fights. So it could be very interesting. Certainly I'm a lot more interested in that than watching Tyron Woodley box up / hit with one right hand around Colby Covington and stop all his takedowns. Anyway, let's get into some of these fights this weekend, because a couple of bangers going on. Should we do Rizin first? Should we do UFC first? Because Rizin I'm more excited for, even though the UFC card is ridiculously solid. But Rizin doesn't have half the quality of fighters, but it has so much entertainment value. We'll do Rizin first, actually. We'll keep things proper. As always, there's a few fighters on here I don't really know. Darren Cruikshank's taking on Tom Santos, who apparently is the number 11 lightweight in Japan, according to Tapology. 9-5-0. Currently fighting in Pancrase. Won his last 2 fights there by knockout. Actually, most of his wins have come by knockout. So you've got a bit of a banger, apparently, coming in here. Whereas Darren Cruikshank himself is a wheel-kicky banger. And that's a good fight for Cruikshank, because obviously not quite on the same level as the guys who've given him trouble. But, as Izuki actually showed, Cruikshank will open himself up to counters. And if you're a big hitter and you can time him, that's always good. I'm an unapologetic Darren Cruikshank fan. I think he's tremendous. I think he's everything that's good about the entertaining side of this sport. I think the UFC cut him far too soon. I mean, if you listen to the podcast regularly, you'll be sick of this moan. But he was on 20-20 or something like that. And they could have paid him 50 and 50, and still got their money's worth out of him. Because if you put him on a televised card or televised prelims, he is getting people hype. Even his losses were good fights against good opponents. Since arriving in Rizin, he's beaten Shinji Sasaki, which was a bit of a gimme. Andy Sauer, which if you're an MMA fighter against Andy Sauer in an MMA fight, it doesn't matter if you're known as a striker, you're going to take him down and choke him. It's exactly what Phil Baroni did to, what was that Japanese boxer? Nishijima. Nishijima could have been good, actually, but they fed him to the wolves right off the bat. The Japanese matchmaking system, just hilarious. Actually, in fairness, that's what Rizin's done quite well. They're building their prospects up. Whereas Nishijima was a pretty fun boxer. He had a great left hook, and he was actually boxing much better than most fighters in MMA at the time. Even though he was only like a middleweight, they were like, here's Mark Hunt, here's Phil Baroni, here's Cyborg Evangelista, who, not great, but still much better than guy with one fight on his record. It was a bit harsh, but they're doing much better at that now. Anyway, so Andy Sauer coming over and immediately fighting Darren Cruikshank. Of course he was going to get choked. But then he fought Satoru Kitayuka in what was a really entertaining fight. That was the one where he hit him with the D side. Kitayuka ran at him, he hit him with the D side, and that carried Cruikshank back through the air on one foot. And then he backstepped and hit him with the left hand. Oh no, was it a back fist? It was a D side into something, and it was really cool. And it knocked Kitayuka down, but Kitayuka actually won that by the guillotine. Real late in round 1, 8 minutes into round 1. That's what I love about the 10-minute first round. And to be fair, I don't know if they're doing that for many of these fights or not. They seem to change bits of the rules from event to event. But the 10-minute first round, once you get to 8 minutes of that is a grueling round. And then he fought Yasuki Yachi in the 2017 Yokohama event. And that was a really good fight too. Both of them just swanging and banging. Yasuki Yachi trained with him years and years ago. He was a kid at the time, but he's grown into something really quite incredible. He's looking fucking gigantic, because he wasn't when I knew him, but his striking's come along in leaps and bounds. He wears the Bruce Lee shorts a lot of the time, which is awesome, and he's got a Japanese afro, so what's not to like about him? But Yachi just went on to have that banger with Gomi, where Gomi was getting lit up, so he takes him down and starts headbutting him in the stomach. And the face, actually, too. Yeah, Gomi got a bit cheaty in that fight, but it was a good fight nonetheless. Then he beat Alex Trevino and Koshi Matsumoto. The Matsumoto one was the one where he head kicked him. I think he was wearing American trunks at the time, because he did the Living in America entrance a couple of times. Wearing American trunks or whatever it is, stars and bars. Head kicks this guy, who he's been nothing but nice to up to that point. They shook hands right at the start, because everyone went back. What was said? What happened? They shook hands right at the start. They were all cool all the way through. He head kicks him and immediately flips him off. And I think he's trying to do like a Stan Hansen thing now, being the dirty gaijin. If he fakes a spinning kick and runs and spins into a discus lariat, you'll know. But so he's got this Tom Santos guy. It should be fun. Looks like they're just giving him another win. It's interesting because he can lose to not great lightweights. So Satoru Kitayuka is not a great lightweight by any means. He's a storied lightweight. He's fought everyone, but he's not got any striking, and his grappling is really all he has. He wouldn't last a minute against many of the guys in the UFC. But Cruikshank is a very hit-and-miss guy. He can go from putting Paul Felder on rubbery legs with a sweet chin music to losing to Kitaoka. So it's a weird one. But I think I've given enough time to that fight. Sorry, I'm just gushing over Darren Cruikshank. But that's your opening main card fight. How good is that? Tadaki Yamamoto versus T-Tiger Muay Thai. Presumably fighting out of Tiger Muay Thai. Thanong Saklek, apparently. He's 5-1. That should be fun enough. His fights aren't exclusively in in 1FC, so he's not been that padded. But I don't really know much about Yamamoto. Sari Ishioka versus Miyu Yamamoto. Love Miyu Yamamoto. 40-something years old. Absolutely banging. Fought on the same card as her son, and was hotter than the ring girls, which was hilarious. But the Yamamoto girls are something special. I can't remember if it was Miyu or Seiko, but one of them had a baby and was like 6 months later went to the Worlds in wrestling and won it. They are very, very talented wrestlers. And Seiko Yamamoto turned up for ADCC, not this time but last time, and silvered in her division with like no BJJ experience. Everyone loves Miyu Yamamoto. No one really cares if she wins. But she is 1-3, and Tapology has her ranked at the 104th atom weight in the world, which tells you how few atomweight fighters there are. But, we're getting excited for the atomweights in a minute because we're going to be talking about the main event. Rin Nakai's back against Shizuka Sugiyama. Neither of these girls anything special, but everyone likes Nakai because she's thick as a bowl of oatmeal and does soft porn. Unranked Mongolian versus Shoma Shibisai, who knows? And then we're into the main guys. Satoru Kitaoka versus Diego Brandao. That's quite interesting because while Diego Brandao is a dangerous banger on the feet, he is also a notorious gasser and a man who makes terrible decisions. I think this is his first fight since he gassed out against Akhmed Aliev and was getting beaten up with body kicks. So he got on the ground and then declared that he was headbutted and made a scene and left the cage. The guy is a nutcase and the least professional fighter in the world. But, he could bang out Kitaoka, and he is a legit black belt in BJJ. Very good on the ground. Kitaoka, very much an MMA sort of grappler, but a top-tier one in that. So I'm very excited for that fight. I just wonder how spastic and flailing Kitaoka's striking will look on the feet. It's been 60 fights. He's not getting much better. Then we're getting into the real stuff, the sad stuff, really. Takanori Gomi versus Melvin Guillard. I was trying to work out when this fight would have been perfect. Takanori Gomi obviously was the best lightweight in the world for quite a while, even while people were whilst Penn was sort of globe-trotting, and also even when Penn got back into the UFC lightweight division, Gomi had beaten a lot more top fighters. And really they had that fight very early in Gomi's career. And Gomi's peak sort of came after he learned to box, or passably box, and started incorporating the body shots, got his conditioning on point. When he met BJ, he was sort of a one-note ground and pounder, and BJ immediately put him on his back, and then that was that, basically. And Guillard, obviously, very highly touted for a while, really struggled with grapplers when they sort of dragged him down and ground on him a bit. He's the epitome of black explosive, really. he was, 155-pound dude knocking people out with right straights to the solar plexus. Just ludicrously powerful for his weight and very quick. But obviously that's sort of waned with time, and also his chin is shot, and also his gas tank isn't really there anymore, and he's always had trouble with the grapplers too. So this could be a sad one, because, Gomi's chin is absolutely shot too. Melvin was never known for his chin. Gomi was known for his chin at one point. Part of his success in just walking dudes down and beating the shit out of their body was that he could pretty much disregard punches to the face. Never the best defensive fighter, and always an aggressive guy and there to be hit. There's a clip of him in Shuto back in the day when he was very young. I think he had red hair at the time, but not naturally, obviously died. But some guy round kicks him in the head. He falls to the floor. He makes the loudest bang you've ever heard. He falls to the floor and immediately gets up and bends down to pick up the referee's pen, which has fallen out of the referee's top pocket, while the referee's counting for him. Just completely unfazed by this guy shin kicking him straight in the noggin. Gomi did go to his grappling more against Yachi, I was quite encouraged by his fight against Isaac Valley Flag and his fight against Diego Sanchez. I believe that was another Diego Sanchez robbery, wasn't it? But he was looking a bit, he has this very long jab. He likes to parry with the right hand way out in front and then, or check the hand with the right hand way out in front and then leap in with this long sort of overhand jab, taking his head off to the side. And he can really hurt guys with that, like mark them up badly. And then he was getting to the body work and stuff in those two fights and it looked really good. But Yachi just beat the shit out of him in the early going, from what I remember. So, prepare to be sad. I hope Gomi wins. It'll be less sad, I think. I don't know. I mean, Melvin Guillard was fighting Israel Adesanya the other month, which is just tragic. This guy who is a lightweight fighting at middleweight. And, his management have been fucking awful. He lost a fight due to a very flagrant headbutt from Derek Campos. The headbutt changed the entire fight and was deliberate because if you watch Campos versus Pitbull, he tries the exact same thing again. He gets hit, he runs backwards, he ducks his head and drives it forward towards the opponent. Melvin Guillard's team never appealed that. Instead, they went and found him fights against middleweights and got his ass kicked. Just the people around him are scum and he needs to get out from under them. Jiri Prochaska versus, let's have a go at this guy's name, Bruno Enrique Capelloza. That's not that bad, actually. 10-4, light heavyweight. All you really need to know. His last fight was at the Sao Paulo Regional, which basically probably describes his talent level. He fought in Rizin before against Theodoros Oxtuolis and got knocked out in the first round. That's the extent of his record. But Jiri I do like. Jiri's a fun fighter. Competed as both a heavyweight and a light heavyweight. Every time he comes in as a heavyweight, I always think he looks massive. And then he can clearly make the light heavyweight limit, so, fair enough. On a streak of 4 wins since the Mo Lawal loss back at the Rizin Grand Prix 2015. His last losses before that were back in 2013 and 2012, so he's been doing good for himself. He's been fighting loads. Actually, not loads. 2 fights in 2016, 2 fights in 2017. This is his first of 2018, so I'm just used to seeing him more. I think it's because he's on every Rizin card. I think that he fights loads. But yeah, 3 knockouts in his last 4. Doing good. His fight against... Oh, actually, one of those was against Fujita, so we can't really count that. But his fight against Fujita, he showed a really nice faked front kick and then bounced in on one leg to make distance and land the 1-2. That was gorgeous. Obviously, it was against Fujita, but it was cool. So he's clearly smart enough to do that stuff, but it'd be interesting to see him do it against not a heavy bag. Of course, Rizin doesn't really have any heavyweights, but then if they bring in... Well, Krokop's off in Bellator now, and even then they were having to dig up the ghost of TK, who wasn't very good to start with, and is also now 50 years old for Krokop to fight. But, aside from, like, Baruto, they could get Josh Barnett, but Josh Barnett would just be... That would be almost unfair to everyone, booking, Jiri versus Josh Barnett. So you're in sort of a pickle. Jiri's got to fight no-namers, basically, because the one name he fought, Mo Lawal, beat him. And they don't really have a heavyweight division in Rizin. They just have a load of schlubs who come in occasionally. Then you got my boy Kyoji Horiguchi versus Hiramasa Ogikubo. Ogikubo, famous for that guy saying, "Hey, I'm smart," and then they cut to him with like a face going, on tough. Absolutely hilarious, man. But what did he do here? He won 3 fights on tough, lost to Tim Elliott, the eventual winner, and then didn't get booked into a UFC card, which is super strange. Fun fighter, fun grappler, lots of wins by rear naked choke, or a few wins by rear naked choke, doesn't finish a lot of people. And, he's fought Kyoji before, that's the main thing. He lost to Kyoji back in 2013, but has only lost that exhibition against Tim Elliott since. So he's been trucking along, mainly Shuto and The Ultimate Fighter, basically. And Vale Tudo Japan, which is like Shuto but cooler, basically. Shuto, home of the draw, home of the decision. Like, someone was telling me that, I was lamenting the fact that they basically run out of people to feed Kyoji, and I would really, the best thing that could happen is if, like, I think this was around the time John Dodson left the UFC briefly in words only. But I was saying they really need to find someone for Kyoji to fight, because he's had to go up to bantamweight to fight people, because he's actually a flyweight. And the two that people have mentioned are Ueda, who he fought back in the day and lost to, I think, in his 6th fight, and Hiramasa Ogikubo, who he beat quite early on, but then Ogikubo's lost 1 fight and it was an exhibition since then. So Ueda's won a load of fights since then. The problem is that in their last 20 fights, they have about 6 finishes between them. So you're not really selling premier excitement versus Kyoji. You're more just selling, here's another Kyoji fight, and here's a reason why you could argue that his opponent is a respectable opponent, in the future when you're trying to argue that he's the best flyweight in the world, or bantamweight, or whatever he's fighting at now. So expect Kyoji to win, but if Ogikubo pulls that off, that'll be amazing. I don't know. He's not a huge threat on the feet, and Kyoji is. And Kyoji's got the distance down and is going to have you lunging onto his massive left straights. But we'll see, because, if there was one problem with Kyoji in the UFC, which he's sort of worked on with ATT, the entire time before the 3 fights before the Demetrius Johnson fight, he gave up his back at some point in each one of those fights and had the guy hanging on his back for a minute in each of those fights. And I think he did it standing most of the time too. So he just was quite a reckless, clumsy sort of dude before he went to ATT and started actually being able to escape back position if he got there, firstly, and avoid that sort of nonsense too. And then you got your main event, the do-over, Reina versus Kana Asakura. You know who they want to win here. They want Reina to win because Reina is incredibly marketable. And Kana Asakura, while adorable schoolgirl, is one, not as hot as Reina, in fact not really hot at all, and Reina's not that hot, to be honest. It's just sort of weebs who like her, but she's also a grappler and not a tremendously successful finisher as a grappler either. Something like 5 finishes in her 12 wins, so not a tremendous ratio there. And I've been doing some Reina work this week. I'll probably release it next week with either an update about the win or the loss, but I wanted to do some UFC stuff for Vice instead, because that's going to get more hits and it's probably more important than the girl fight in Rizin, which only really the hardcore are going to watch. But if you watch their first fight, firstly, Reina's very, very cautious. She's been more cautious in her MMA career than she has been in shootboxing. In shootboxing, she was scrappy as fuck. Just walking people down, trading with them. And then there was a little bit of that Kung Lee about her, where she was suplexing kickboxers, in a kickboxing setting. And that was winning her fights as well. But, also she had a wicked liver shot, great straight kicks to the body, and also really good at just sort of slightly slipping offside in exchanges and winning on having head movement in a sport where most women do not, to be honest. And it's been the same, but much more measured in MMA. A little bit like Saki, just really dialing it back. She doesn't have single shot power as much as Saki does, obviously. So there's an awful lot of stance switching, too. She does tons of that. She parks up in front of someone and then immediately steps back into a southpaw stance, hoping that they'll run in and she'll catch him with the check hook, or she'll lance him with the straight left. And if they don't, she'll kick him with the left leg. That's not entirely uncommon in Muay Thai. But it is something interesting that she does over and over. Tremendous knees from the clinch. Really, really good there. If you watch her get to the clinch, constantly circling out counterclockwise, pivoting around that right leg, just so she can knee the liver, and she's really good at it. And this fight, the first fight with Asakura, she did a really good job of stopping the takedowns. She was controlling the distance well. But then, when she got put on the ropes, the thing about the ropes is that they are sort of a disadvantage to... People try to advertise them as stopping wall and stall and lay and pray, and they don't, because, wall and stall and lay and pray, the counter to that is being able to get up, and having a solid thing behind you helps with that. But also, if you watch someone like Israel Adesanya, striker, but his takedown defense is built largely around, if he gets pushed to the fence, he's then using the fence to hold himself up while he pummels, gets better position, and then circles off. Same thing with Jose Aldo and countless others. But you can't really do that as well against the ropes as you can against the fence. The takedown attempts in the first fight kind of did take her down early, and Reina held onto the ropes with her elbow. Throw your elbow over the rope, and that's not grabbing it technically, but it is. And sort of dragged herself up like that. But equally, the ropes serve as like a barrier without being something you can lean against. So the third shot, I think it was, that comes in, and the one that actually gets her down, she goes to sprawl, and then she's sort of pushed up against the ropes and has to choose between falling through the ropes or just not sprawling anymore. And then Asakura whips around and turns her onto her back because she's not massively sprawling anymore, not smashing her hips down at the back of her head. I mean, it was a nice follow-up on takedown, just running around and cutting the corner like that, but I think the ring helped there. I think in a cage, obviously Reina's probably not training with a cage, but I think Rena is being sort of sold short in her options by not fighting the cage. The other thing she does all the time is stomps. She's always, anytime she gets someone on the ground, she will kick the leg and then perform like a bicycle kick into a stomp thing over the guard. And that just basically gives people your leg. Every time she's done it, she's got her leg tied up. And, she's been fighting not great fighters. I mean, there aren't an awful lot of great fighters in the atomweight division, but it's just a bit of a mess, and that was what we were finding towards the end of Pride 2, especially going back and watching all these old events, is that the soccer kicks and stomps really didn't work against top guys as well as they did against schlubs anymore, because you are giving your leg. You can be entangled. You can, guys can come up on takedowns and things like that. The only guy really having success with it was Shogun, because he combined it with a really strong guard passing game and top game. But even then, he wasn't having anywhere near the same success against really top guys, except Arona with the weird stomp to hammer fist. But certainly against like Roger Nog, he wasn't having anywhere near the same level of success with his jumping stomps and soccer kicks. Anyway, that should be a fun one. I kind of hope Asakura wins, because I quite like her. When she won the first one, she seemed so surprised with herself. She was like bursting into tears, and Reina was like hugging her and going, "It's okay, you won, don't worry, calm down." But obviously, Reina is the one that they want to have the success, because if Reina has a belt on her and actually gets some title defenses against some schlubs, you could really push that, superstar Reina. Because the whole thing was, she's really marketable, really exciting fighter, finishes bitches, but she wanted to stay in this super niche sport from 2012. No, I think it was 2009 was her first shootboxing, performance. In shootboxing at least, and then she won the 2012 and 2014 S Cup in shootboxing, and people were like, "Why are you staying in this ultra niche sport? You are so marketable." But now she's fighting in MMA, I suppose, and she's only 27. To be fair, this isn't like Michael Page at 30 having fought no one in MMA, so she's doing decently. But anyway, that's that to look forward to. And then I suppose the real competitive card of the weekend is the UFC one, and the UFC card is actually pretty bloody strong looking down it. You got some decent names in the start. You got Randa Marcos, who is decent within that division. Alexis Davis versus Katlyn Chookagian rather. Alexis Davis, I like as a grappler, but whenever someone brings up Cindy Vanderwaal's awful striking, remember that Alexis Davis struggled against that. In a fight that took place largely on the feet, Alexis Davis was still getting hit and not really landing very good shots against that woman for, was it 3 rounds? A full decision. So, that's the state of the number 7 flyweight in the world right there, according to Tapology. But I think I don't know what she is now, but anyway. John McDasey versus Ross Pearson. Yes, that is a great fight. That would have been a greater fight in 2014 maybe, but that is a fight that has me very excited. You got my boy Ross the Boss, who is one of the slicker counterpunchers in the lightweight division, still, even. But doesn't like the kickies, does not like being kicked. Whereas John McDasey, very good kicker, very bad boxer, but loves a spinning back fist and loves a high kick. So you got two guys whose best bits match up really well with their opponent's worst bits, but their worst bits also match up really badly with their opponent's best bits. So I love that fight. We all went off John McDasey for a while because he wasn't paying people when he was sponsoring them as, Fear the Fighter or something like that. Gegard Mousasi got really pissy about that. But decently fun fighter. What's he been up to? Hold on. I know Ross Pearson has been just losing lots. Dan Hooker smoked him, which was really hard to watch, but also Dan Hooker's awesome. Oh no, he got that win over Mizuto Hirota back at UFC 221. But yeah, up until that point, it had been lost to Will Brooks. That was a really good fight with Will Brooks, actually. Everyone's like bummed on Will Brooks now. Will Brooks needs a fucking sports psychologist because Will Brooks has mad potential. It wasn't a fluke that he beat Michael Chandler twice. But he has just fallen off a cliff. And we know that Michael Chandler is as legit as they come because Eddie Alvarez had trouble with him and then Eddie Alvarez came over and has been great. Or, mixed success at the top levels but been a champion. So yeah, that Will Brooks fight was good. Jorge Masvidal, barely remember that. It's a decision, a unanimous decision, because it's Jorge Masvidal, but I assume that it was a very conservative unanimous decision because it was Jorge Masvidal. But then he lost to Stevie Ray on that split decision, and then he lost the knockout to Dan Hooker. Basically, if you can stand him up with kicks, you can really hurt him. If you can time him ducking with an uppercut or a knee or a kick, you can really hurt him. Meanwhile, John McDacey, we were all super stoked on him when he got that win over Shane Campbell, and then he fought Donald Cerrone and just got smashed. That was the one where he got his jaw broken. It was just like no mass. Then he lost to Yancy Medeiros by split decision. Then he got a decision win, split again over Mehdi Baghdad. And then there was obviously that wheel kick against Lando Venata, and then cancelled bout against Sage Northcutt and Chomo's Choice, Sage Northcutt, and then got a win over Abel Trujillo. But, not really been up to much since that 2015 loss to Donald Cerrone. 2 wins, one a split decision, the other a decision. So these guys are really sort of on the down slope now, but they are such fun stylistic entities. There was a time when everyone sort of fought the fucking same on the feet. It was, I practice Muay Thai, I have a very hard right low kick and I'm going to swang and bang. But these guys are so unique. McDacey was one of the very first doing the side kick and using it to set up the spinning back fists and things. And Ross Pearson, really good slips and left hook counters, almost unheard of in MMA at that point. And still fairly rare to see a guy doing that so well, with the danger of kicks and everything. So, I'm excited for that. Antigulov versus Ion Kutalaba. Hey, Kutalaba's back from his roid suspension. Woo! That'll be fun. Islam Makhachev versus Kajan Johnson. I liked Kajan Johnson against Stevie Ray, but it was a very slow fight for most of it. Hakeem Dawodu versus Austin Arnett. Oh, I remember Hakeem Dawodu. He was the one who came in with so much hype, had the big scary face. Then he fought Danny Henry, and immediately got guillotine choked in 39 seconds. That was such a cool performance out of Danny Henry. But yeah, so he's getting a chance to make a second first impression against a guy on a 2-fight losing streak. So yeah, they do want to get some hype back on him. My boy Jordan Mean is back against Alex Morono. I know barely anything about Alex Morono, but I do know I like Jordan Mean. Always looking for the elbows, always looking for the liver shot, always getting hit just a little bit too much for me to be comfortable. Right? Oh, Morono just guillotine choked Josh Bergman. Now I remember. Yeah, that should be good. Then we're getting into the big stuff on the main card. Aleksandr Hernandez, he came in against Beneil Dariush and just smashed him. It was awesome. Beautiful stance switches, beautiful shifts and stuff. And was it an inside right? Caught him at the end? Can't remember, but that is just the danger of the lightweight division and taking fights on short notice. Lesson learned the hard way for Beneil Dariush. You go from being a top 10 lightweight to being, top 15, top 20 lightweight because you took a fight on short notice to be a hero and save the card. But he's fighting Olivier Aubin-Mercier, which is a rough fight. If Aubin-Mercier's had time to train for it, and now Aleksandr Hernandez is not an unknown, whereas for Beneil Dariush he probably was. Aubin-Mercier, very measured, works his jab a lot, great grappler, great judo. So, I think I want to see Aubin-Mercier slow that fight down, keep it at a distance, let the guy bounce around, do his switches, beat TJ Dillashaw for a round and a half maybe, and then start grinding on him in the clinch, back him up to the fence, start mauling him, and then look for either a late finish or just try and take the second and third round. I'd say, take the first round off, just let him work himself out, and then start jabbing and clinching and stuff. Joanna Jacek versus Tisha Torres. Oh, Tisha Torres. You're so fun to look at, but so boring to watch. Coming off that loss to Jessica Andrade, because Jessica Andrade is my roidy princess and she beats everyone. But Tisha Torres did beat Michelle Waterson, which... as much as I like Michelle Waterson, her creepy legion of fans, I do enjoy it when she loses because of that. Tisha Torres, 3-fight winning streak before that Andrade fight. So this is a good sort of getting back on the horse for Jacek because there's not really... Once you've had that second loss to the champion, you don't really have anywhere to go. So you've got to build back up, build some momentum so that you have a reason to challenge as soon as the champion loses. Jacek obviously coming off the 2 losses to Namajunas, who... the second one was much closer, but Namajunas really looked slick in both fights. I'll be interested to see what Tisha Torres can do on the feet against Joanna Jacek, because Tisha Torres used to be the case that she was like throwing axe kicks and stuff, and people were like, oh my god, this is high-level kickboxing in women's MMA. And then Joanna Jacek and Rose Namajunas came out with their jabs, and were like, nah mate, this is high-level kickboxing in MMA, or women's MMA. Jose Aldo versus Jeremy Stephens, that is a good fight. Jeremy Stephens I have slagged off on the podcast before, and... go back and listen, because I said he's an overrated finisher. I didn't say he's an overrated puncher. He has always had ridiculous power because he swings for the fences. The problem was that he can't get people to stand still and eat it. His name's Renato Canero. But Renato Moicano showed that most recently. Frankie Edgar showed it too. Max Holloway showed it, but if you move around on him, he has a very hard time dealing with it. And if you're not in the pocket too long, he has a hard time dealing with it. And he tires himself out by swinging the entire time. Gilbert Melendez was in a rough spot because the low kicks made him stand still. Duo Choi and Josh Emmett, he managed to work over a bit with low kicks too, but also did much better cage cutting, I thought. Very interested to see what he does against Jose Aldo, because Jose Aldo is Mr. React on a hair trigger, but also exhausts himself by doing it. Jose Aldo loves to take breaks. If you watch the two fights with Max Holloway, each time he comes in, he knows that there's a good chance that Jose Aldo will clinch him and take a break. So his head comes down and he immediately left hooks the body or elbows the face on the way out. Jose Aldo doesn't do boxing head movement, which is where your head's sort of always in motion if you're good. Jose Aldo stands perfectly still and then reacts to what you throw at him, comes back with a counter and like spaz it out doing it. So he gets very tired very quickly if he's made to work at a high pace. He does, however, have very nice pivots and understands that getting offline is a good answer to guys who are just going to come straight at him, which is where he matches up interestingly with Stevens, because Stevens has had so much trouble with the footwork of his opponents. However, the pivot is really more of a thing for breaking off combinations and putting yourself in position to counter. But when you're dealing with a guy who's swinging straight arm clotheslines that really you're not going to shoulder roll off too neatly, that's going to get messy. Also, the right low kick can be a problem for Aldo, especially if he's focusing on those pivots. I hope Aldo kicks his leg, because we're all talking about, like, a compilation of Aldo's low kicks went up on Reddit the other day, and noticeably most of them are like pre-2014. He has not low kicked a lot of people lately, and typically he goes to it much more against wrestlers than he does against good strikers. One of the things that Max Holloway did very well in their first fight was either being out of range or coming in with that lead foot and knee pointed out sort of 45 degrees. And then in fact, I think the only kick that Aldo threw in the first fight, he immediately went down the center with a straight right afterwards. So you sort of have to like make him scared to kick you, because it's easily his most powerful weapon. He has decent counter-punching combinations, but the real hurting is in that low kick. And if he's going to choose not to use it, that's a real odd decision that is just sort of hamstringing his hamstring kick, sort of hamstringing his best technique for no real reason. The thing about Stevens though is he does open himself up to clinches though, so he will give Aldo those opportunities to take breaks. And Stevens has also found himself on the end of takedowns that he probably shouldn't, like the sort of Dan Henderson syndrome, where you have very good takedown defense when you're remembering your takedown defense, and then immediately you forget it because you're swinging, and then suddenly you're on your back by Anthony Pettis or someone like that, But that should be interesting. I mean, late career resurgence for Jeremy Stevens, basically by merit of timing, I suppose, would be really interesting. And then Eddie Alvarez versus Dustin Poirier in the main. I'm going to write something about this tomorrow. But I really liked Dustin Poirier's like redneck shoulder roll in the first fight. And drawing Eddie out seems to be a much better option than going to Eddie, or at least getting in Eddie's face and then make him come to you. Eddie's a lot more vulnerable when he's sort of like diving in with right hand leads and things. He's not. If you like are pursuing him and trying to hit him, like Michael Chandler or Rafael dos Anjos, you have the danger of running yourself onto his power, because he is a big hitter. And also just feeding him easy body shots, which he likes. And I always like that sort of darting in and out style. I always like that. It works better when the opponent's moving at you, because you can hit them and just sort of glide past them. And every sort of like angle that you cut as you leave is exaggerated by them moving towards you. If they're waiting for you and you're going at them, you're firstly having to make more distance because they're not coming onto you, and your angle's just not as neat on the way out either. Having said that, it could turn into a wrestling fight. Who knows? I will write something about that tomorrow, but it's interesting where they are in their careers, because like we said in the last podcast, Eddie Alvarez is about to negotiate his contract again. This is the last fight of his contract. And while he's always going to be worth a lot of money to the UFC because he's entertaining and he can always go, in his last 5 fights, he's only lost one, that Conor McGregor one. We all just remember it differently because it was a blowout. And the no contest against Dustin Poirier because of the illegal knee. But he's beaten a lot of good guys. They weren't always the most entertaining fights. The Dos Anjos one was, but I think the thing is that Bellator will always be willing to pay Eddie Alvarez huge amounts of money to come back because he's a known name. Conor McGregor is always fucking there, so you can make something out of that. They are desperate to push Straight Blast gym guys into the top of every division. They just hired another straight blast gym guy today. And frankly, Eddie Alvarez, I would love to see him just go and get more money for easier fights at this point. But, the top of that division is so packed that I don't know if that's going to be a decent negotiation strategy, even if he wins this fight. Whereas Dustin Poirier is on a pretty decent streak of wins on his own. He's got the Jim Miller fight, which was actually a really tough fight. It was surprising to see, especially recently with how good he's been looking. Like Anthony, the Alvarez, Pettis, and Gaethje fights, really good looks for Poirier. I thought he looked really crisp. I thought he looked really technical and really a much cleaner version of himself. There were fights back in the day where he was getting rocked by Akira Korosani, who is just not a very good fighter and definitely not a very good striker, just because he swung open and was always leaving his chin way up in the air. In recent fights, he's looked a lot better, but it was very interesting that he struggled so much with Jim Miller, who, Jim Miller himself wouldn't argue with the fact that he's over the hill now. He's winding down in his career, but he still gave Poirier a really hard fight, and the low kicks in that fight were absolutely brutal. And Eddie Alvarez can kick a leg. He basically broke Roger Huerta with like 2 leg kicks. But he doesn't really do them very much, which is a bit of a shame. But they both had that great fight over Gaethje. Obviously, both back and forth fights. They weren't like perfect, because that's the nature of fighting Gaethje. You're going to get dragged into a bit of a banger, even if you're doing the right things. The fight with Pettis really displayed his grappling ability. He only showed a little bit of boxing in that fight, but he was really slick doing it, backing him up to the fence. I wouldn't be surprised if this turns into a bit more of a wrestling match, if I'm honest. I think one of the things to watch out for, which might tell you sort of like ahead of time how the fight's going to go, or give you a hint, is how Eddie's throwing the right hand, because he can tend to overextend on that, and that sort of opens him up to the redneck shoulder roll counter, but also, especially against southpaws like McGregor and Poirier, that open side counter. And also he just sort of squares up a little bit too much and then takes a while coming back with the left hook, or he'll just throw the right hand and then try and go straight back out rather than ducking out the side door. It's just like, if you see him hanging around too long after the right hand, or digging it to the body and then standing there, that could end badly for him. I'd like to see him moving, being real careful with the darting in and out, making sure that Poirier's coming to him first, kicking the legs when possible, digging the body, because he's always done well digging the body. The right straight to the solar plexus against a southpaw, always money. And for Poirier, I'd say try and make use of the right hook. Doesn't really use his right hook as much as he should, to sort of herd Eddie in, make him circle out the other way. Look for the inside counter with the left hand, or open side counter with the left hand. Look for that redneck shoulder roll, and also uppercuts. I would say, if he can, uppercut left hook out of the exchanges, and also if he can hang on the back of the head with the right hand and look for uppercuts too, because Eddie, I don't think he's got too much of a height disadvantage in this fight, but he does fight in sort of a crouch too, so he's always sort of got his head in front of his hips, which exposes you to the uppercut, and Poirier's got a good uppercut that he doesn't really use as much as he should. I don't have any idea how that fight will go. I hope it's as good as the first one. But then the thing about like controversial rematches is that they tend to fight a little bit safer in the rematch, or they both come in going like, I'll mix it up and confuse him, and then you get sort of a stalemate rather than a wicked bang out on the feet. But, could be great. Could be that we're at the end of this one, we're like, okay, so that's one no contest and now one of them has a win. We should probably do 2 more. Oh. Anyway, God, I've just rambled on about those fights, or this weekend's fights, for like an hour now. Won't do a question today, but just wanted to get my thoughts down on the fights coming out this weekend. Those are the ones that I really think you should look out for. I mean, Martin Nguyen's fighting in, or Martin Nguyen, same name as Diane in BoJack, but he's fighting in one. He's a very good fighter, and presumably the guy actually, you never know with one. The guy he's fighting could not be good. LFA have a title fight on this weekend. Karate Combat is back with Karate Combat Olympus, and I really hope they do like WrestleMania at Caesar's Palace and everyone comes in a themed costume. So yeah, you got fucking loads going on this weekend. I'm sure there's some boxing too, and probably like either a K1 or a no kick, no light, knockout or a Rise event or some shit on this weekend too. So yeah, pretty good. I didn't even talk about Glory 55, which I watched the other day. But anyway, we'll catch up on probably Monday. There will be tons to talk about. I'll be writing something for Vice for tomorrow. I've already put up a piece on Jack Sharkey this week, which you should probably read because he's one of my favourites. When I say one of my favourites, I mean he's my second favourite heavyweight champion after Jersey Joe. So that's high level boy. Just the most maddening man in the history of the heavyweight title. He can go from battering Dempsey to struggling with middleweights. It's really weird. So definitely read that article. Tons of GIFs, tons of diagrammed GIFs, which I know you like. And then if you want to get on the Patreon episodes, we're doing the K1 early years coming up, and then we'll be doing the Opium Wars in next month's one, which is a little bit less fighty, but it leads into the Boxer Rebellion. Get in on the Patreon to enjoy those and support the podcast. Oh, by the way, the podcast is now up on Spotify, so you can just put it on and binge all of them. And it'll be in reverse order, so you'll hear me say, well, I knew that was going to happen, and then in the next episode you'll hear me say the exact opposite beforehand. And everything I do goes up on thefightprimer.com. Send your emails and questions to fightsgonbypodcast@gmail.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack, and I will catch you on Monday. Enjoy the fights, there's a fucking lot of them. Cheers.